It's
Okay,
Friday.
awesome. It's Friday. Yes, it is Friday. Yeah, I see we have Dylan here from Australia. And I see we have some other people, Bridget, Darius, Chen Shun, Pedro. I think this is my first time meeting you. Welcome and thank you so much for joining our presentation today. So I'm Sabrina. I am actually the co-owner and marketing director of a trading company, but we also provide marketing and also content design and UX writing services to brands that want to sell overseas. And so we can go to the next slide, Anna. So pretty much just to give you a quick background, professional life in the US before I moved to China, I did PR and marketing. And then next slide, the next two slides, you'll also see other parts of my life in China, where in the next slide, I have a hobby in craft beer. I taught at one point, and then I was a content strategist for Alibaba. Then I basically joined my now fiance. We're now engaged in our own company. He handles our import and export, and I handle everything from content design, marketing for clients, and also now branched into sales and craft beer e-commerce as well. So next slide, please. So I feel like first and foremost, I need to ask everybody here, how are you feeling about your content design, your UX, or your localization role? So I put some different answers. I'd love to see you but just put it in the chat for about a quick minute. So I have A, always arguing with your stakeholders. Are you feeling frustrated? Do you don't understand why you're arguing about your native language all the time? What about like having to explain your job or role or values? Or maybe you could share in the comment section. I'm going to pull up the meeting chat right next to me. And let's see who else, like, I'm curious. What is everybody feeling? So I see C, don't understand why you are arguing about your native language with non-natives. Yes, all the time. F, all of the above. I love it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I feel like a lot of the time we're just always like, what is happening here? Like, it's like you might feel frustrated. You're feeling like this is all going on, right? Yeah, Anna's saying it's really hard to explain what we do. And I'll give you guys maybe one more, maybe a quick 10 more seconds if anybody else wants to jump right in. Well, let me go to the next slide for me. Okay, so let's be honest with you. Like, I feel everything here. I'm feeling the always arguing. Yes, like Bridget mentioned, a lot of back and forth, like the feeling the frustrated, tired, all of the repetitive content requests. And for me and work, why am I arguing about English more so than I did back when I was in the States? Always having to explain my job role, my value to business. And yes, like I felt this project, like I actually really felt this, like my new role, I felt it was something I didn't sign up for. So it's where I was feeling a little stuck and trapped. So next slide, please. So here's the deal. So when I was in college, I basically I had to take a class where we studied communication. And part of the communication was learning about persuasion. So for persuasion wise, I had to learn about Aristotle's rhetorical triangle. So here we learned about ethos, pathos, and logos. So meaning like ethos being like credibility and ethics of the person, pathos being more like emotions and feelings and using that to persuade, but also logos being that logic, that reason, like giving just a reasonable explanation to help somebody. And then next slide, please. But to be honest with you, like, let's be real, persuasion is cultural. So for those of you who haven't read The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, actually Anna was the one who introduced me to this book and I am obsessed with it. And it honestly is one of the first books that I read where I started to really understand why my stakeholders were not listening to me. Because I feel like it's not just about persuasion, which I'm going to touch on this last one, persuading principles first and applications first later. But it's also a variety of other factors, in my personal opinion. So, for example, the way you communicate, also the way leadership is established, whether you have more of an egalitarian where it's a group leadership decisions, or maybe it's top down, maybe like your boss decides and everybody else follows. Or even just like from a trusting perspective, just the way you build trust with your colleagues is even like completely different depending on cultures. And so next slide, please. But here's the thing. So Aristotle, he was the man I introduced earlier. He was one of the first philosophers, a Greek who was actually credited with articulating this applications first thinking. And British thinkers actually popularized it. And from the American perspective, where I'm from, basically we have this very like pioneering mentality, this disinclination towards theoretical learning. So we even became more applications first than the British. And this is according to Aaron Meyer of the culture map. So this really comes back to like persuasion and just how persuasion truly is a cultural phenomenon. And so next slide, please. And so even, Anna, if you don't mind, can you click this link? The persuasion is cultural. Just click that link for me.
All right.
Yes,
here we
please.
go.
Thank you. Okay, so basically over here, oh wait, maybe I could share my screen and then I can click the link for you because I purchased the tool. Let's flip. So I'm going to flip my screen now. Let me see. Window. I think this one. Or I'm not sure if it's coming up. So pretty much, okay, so what is going on? Let me do my entire screen share. Oh, it's saying please grant browser access to the recording. Let's see. Okay, I apologize. How about we just skip this part for now? But basically what I was trying to show is I did a culture map, and I'll send a screenshot to everybody in the group later. But basically I did a country mapping of like different cultures. So I did for the US, I did for Ghana, which is where my fiance is from. I did for China. I did for Germany, which is actually the beer brand that I'm working with right now. And I also did Mexico because I'm Mexican American. So basically for me, one thing I wanted to share with you is like when you look at this cultural map, everybody is completely different. So I'll share in the WeChat group later this particular, or maybe I could see if I could share a file, or actually I could share a file and you could see it. So I'm just going to do a quick screenshot, share my file. And you will see in the chat history, if you open the chat history, a country map will appear. And this is where you could see how different cultures, like just even just looking at between the US, looking at China, looking at like even like Mexico, Ghana, just how like every culture skews when it comes to like leadership, deciding, trusting. But then next slide for me. Persuasion is quite interesting because you can't really apply persuasion, this principles first and applications first, with Asian culture. Because in Asian culture, you kind of think more of group think. So it's like about how it's the power, understanding that how one decision can impact everybody, while Western culture is very specific with the approach. While even with the principles first and the applications first, you'll notice how even just across the spectrum, it's different cultures. Some are very about telling the story, like getting straight to the point and then adding the concept to back it up. While with certain cultures, like for example, France, Russia, Spain, Italy, they're more about developing that theory and that complex first before presenting that fact, that statement or opinion. And so next slide, please. And so really that comes down to like understanding culture, understanding how people make decisions, how trust is built, and also how persuasion occurs. If you look at that and take some time, even like outside your own culture. So, for example, I didn't realize that even within my own culture, this is how we did things. You just assume how everything is done the way you're done. And it isn't until you actually exit your own culture is then when you have that aha moment. And even that aha moment is more of that I am so frustrated moment. And so then taking the time, honestly, to understand the mindset is really where you get things done. So here, I have to give Anna Arnaud's article the shout out because the reality is in China, content is still viewed from a translation lens. We've talked to food delivery app designers that went unnamed, as well as former design leads in Airbnb. And really, the way UX and content writing, even looking at it from live streaming, which I've done some live streaming and localization and copywriting, writing Amazon pages. Everybody, like the way it is copywriting is a basic skill. So talking to people who've never actually done copywriting, it's like everybody's expected to do it in China. While like for example, where I'm from in the US, it's a very specific task. And it's something that's specialized. And so next slide, please. And even like really, it just comes down to understanding the mindset or the way of your stakeholders, your clients, decision makers, customers, etc. So it really comes down to these key questions. It's like, what is the problem and proposed solution? How would it impact business? Why is it important? And what kind of research and results can you gather realistically? And I say realistically because I understand that a lot of us, some of you might work in larger organizations, or some of you might have like data security issues. Like I know when I was at Alibaba, and even with my own client now, data security is such a big deal. And even like priority, is it really a priority to change the mindset? Because sometimes you can do a presentation trying to change somebody's mindset, but the reality is that maybe this specific area you're trying to persuade them about might not be a true priority for everybody. Or like my grandma used to say to me, money talks and shit walks. So in my culture, like a lot of things really is driven by money and who's paying for it and the resources. And it even happens in other fields and industries. Like even talking to my brother who's in the medical industry, who's in medical, he's studying, he's in science. He went from business to science for his master's. And he's even like arguing in his classroom with other master's students that what if some of the studies that they're conducting, even in the medical fields for pharmaceutical meds, is being dictated by these large pharmaceutical companies. They're the ones paying for the setting. So are these results even really worth collecting? Or are they actually giving a full data set of what you need to do to be able to persuade what to do next? And so next slide, please. And so this is where I want to share some cases. I apologize. I do not have visuals to share my cases of my before and after or really concrete data due to some data privacy issues, as well as my old phone has all of my old pictures actually of even like screenshots from when they went online. But I have two cases for you that I want to share on how I convince stakeholders to invest in content design. So case one, I want to take us back to my days at Alibaba, where we were spending way too much time, money, and energy writing and translating or even localizing same or similar content in 17 languages for approximately 30 to 50 sales or promotions per year, from what I remember. And we used to spend hours reviewing banners. So it was late nights at the office, looking at banners, trying to figure out like, okay, is everything correct? And there were just a myriad of issues. So this is where it was my former colleague, Melissa, and we were sitting next to each other late at night, doing a late night banner review and reviewing all of these banners that we pretty much write for every single sale. And that's when we just had this like aha moment, like, what about templates? Why not create content templates for the different sales banners? So this took honestly about maybe 6 months to get it from a small sale to maybe a large sale. We had to start from the lower priority promotions where the stakeholders that were in the position to experiment. And they were in the position to be able to say, okay, maybe I can let's give this a try. In this one, it was also about timing because I was very overwhelmed at the time and I needed to deliver content fast. And I said, look, I can deliver content to you right now. And they were just in shock that I was able to pull lower priority content, deliver content to them that moment, but then still take the time to draft new content for key pages that would actually help with sales. We looked at the sales as the KPI actually, because sales in this business team's case was the most important KPI or metric to have proof of value. So like every single, like it really depends on your stakeholders. So this goes back to mindset. It goes back to all of the other little factors that goes into persuasion. In this case, it was sales. This case, it's the sales number that will determine if this will work. And we did. We still made more money with using banner content from the past because the mindset that we had to spend time changing was your mindset of new content is better. That was the mindset. And then it took some time. We had to take all of these different sales goals, these different metrics. We took the concept. We had to persuade different individuals within the same team because different individuals had different priorities. They had more strict KPIs. They were driven more by their supervisor and some of the decisions that they were making. And so convincing them took time. And then eventually, I have to say, it was like 6 months later, or even like within a year later, the one guy, I remember this one stakeholder, Jale, I'm going to name him, but I adore Jale. Jale was coming, he went from, why should we spend time why should we use previously used content to create content templates for specific pages to let's use templates for lower priority pages. And then designers even took it a step further and were able to do additional quantifiable things to even persuade the business team to even change some of the structures. And I was happy to even share with them, look, we've been doing this even before you guys were, and this is the result. So that was really exciting to share. So really the key takeaway is start, invest small, get your results, adjust your strategy, and scale up. And I honestly do this in business as well. Like I do this even for like beer. I do this in other areas of business and when it comes to persuasion. And so next slide, please. So case number 2. So this one's a fun one. I was hired to do a UX writing project, but my client did not understand what UX writing was or its business value. And the stakeholders had never worked with a UX writer. You might be wondering, why did they hire me? Well, I have to thank ByteDance for that because the main boss, as like I mentioned, Chinese leadership, its top-down approach, the main boss heard ByteDance had a content team and they succeeded. So because ByteDance had a content team, they needed to hire a content person. So I was fortunate to be put in touch with my now client, and it took time. I learned from previous lessons with other clients where pricing is very important when it comes to services here, especially when you're entering freelance. So I shared 2 different pricing scenarios. I gave a UX writing package, and I also gave like a content design writing package where there was more research involved in things. While the UX writing was just really focusing on writing and refining, giving it like a written voice and tone. And it honestly took time. It took meetings with project managers who were so confused about what I was doing. And we had a lot of back and forth. So finally, it was just us 2 on a computer Friday night, having a conversation about the content and how we can improve the content. It also included a lot of back and forth, a lot of explanations on character limits, like even just something so simple as character limits. Why do we need character limits? How should character limits be defined? Here was a recommendation. And we had to have a back and forth direct conversation. And because we could not we could not act in the way of our culture to communicate with each other. I had to be very direct. She had to be very direct. Chinese, it was a Chinese stakeholder, and then myself from the US. To be able, and we both also had to put aside our feelings of like, we're not criticizing each other. We just need to have a very direct conversation with each other to be able to have a better understanding. And then it came to in-person conversations where I even spending time with my client who hired me. He also had to share some things with me that were very crucial in how I need to support them more, but also I shared more information on how I can also support more. But it honestly came down to localization. It was when we started localization was when I created a simple style guide and documentation based on the previous UX code written for our localization vendor. And I spent time like working on like putting together like all of Figmas with all of the UX flows. I spent time putting together a simple term base. I spent time putting together a simple glossary and simple voice and tone. And basically just asking vendors for the support. So every time they would write, they would look at the documentation and then provide that feedback. And basically, I then took that documentation, that feedback from the vendor, and then shared it with my supervisor or my client. And he was blown away. And from what I heard, the team was blown away. And that's how I was able to convince them to say, hey, this is not perfect. I just had to throw something together to share with the vendor, but we can improve upon this. So let's approve. Here's up my proposal. This is how much I want. This is what I want to invest in my time in. I want to improve our project management. I want to improve our style guide, and I want to help create a design system in some manner. And they agreed. And really, it just kind of comes down to like documenting your process and your feedback from customers and stakeholders. And then really, I'm so sorry. I think I spelled demonstrate wrong. Demonstrate how it impacts the business. And really, it just comes down to that unique voice and tone. And I'm really excited about design system because last night I was up till 2 a.m. in the morning because UX Content Collective, they have like Figma trainings. And in the one of the Figma trainings is actually about like using Figma to implement a design system. And I'm gonna give a shout out to this training because it blew my mind. Because if I literally now have ideas, which with this design system, how I can incorporate in Figma. And I'm just so excited to incorporate the Figma and show my client, like, look, we now have the content and design system, how this is going to help save the project manager's time. This will help save me time because right now it's just me doing writing. And also we can speed up the process and make the process less manual. So I'm very excited about that. It's just a step-by-step. It's like, it takes time, honestly, lots and lots of time and persuasion and really just understanding mindset. But it really had to go back to understanding why is the reason they don't understand the value of my work. Understanding how do people communicate, how decisions are made. And now I know how to communicate with my project managers. So I know if I start with them. In China, you have to go up the chain. So I start with them and then I move up the chain if need be. And I asked them before, do you want me to step up to ask your next supervisor? And then that's how really we're able to make things move. Of course, our systems are not perfect. I'm still doing things manually, but I am excited to see what's next. So we're moving in a direction. So next slide, please. And so really, it kind of comes down to you're probably wondering, okay, I am way too busy for this. So this is where it comes down to, where do I begin showing content value? So I love this chart. It's like this priority chart where you could really do low business priority, high business priority versus high customer priority versus low customer priority. Usually, if it's falling in low business priority and low customer priority, honestly, don't bother. Just don't. It's going to waste your time and energy, and and honestly, your mental health is very important. But for like, honestly, if you have high customer priority, high business priority, I always like to add more investment in those areas. But sometimes the best persuasion could sometimes happen under high customer priority and low business priority, or high business priority and low customer priority. But it really comes into your data. So I feel like a lot of us, we are pretty adept with our data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. And you have to just do the best you can with the data and the time that you have to gather. Data can also be competitive research. Data can also be seeing what other UX designers have done in the past and seeing their case studies that they've published online. Data can also be just getting like some simple customer feedback from people within your own network and just being able to collect their demographic and then from there be able to ask them like the key questions you need to know to show the value. And I did recently do this. I actually did it with our vendors because there was some area where I felt like over time we're going to need to change. And I just asked the vendors, the five writers, hey, like what, where would this impact? I collected my data and I just shared with the data with the project manager and said, hey, we can always make our content better in the next version. And so this is where it goes back to the next slide. To me, it's just remember this, understand the mindset. And when I say mindset, I like using the word mindset versus perspective because I feel like mindset is very deeply ingrained. It's something that you grow up with and something that you literally are doing and working in. And you don't really realize it until you're literally outside your own culture and you're literally questioning yourself. And it's like it goes back to the native language, like everybody was saying in the comment section, arguing with stakeholders, non-natives about your native language and how in your culture you don't really argue about it as much. So it really goes back down to that mindset because maybe it's like they're questioning because maybe they have their stakeholders or their leaders are telling them to. Maybe there's other factors involved like that you don't understand. My supervisor, to go back to this mindset thing, my client gave me some really good advice about Chinese mindset. Basically, he said, he gave me this advice. It's a saying that translates to like, don't throw hot pot at the boss, where sometimes they don't want to blame the boss in a conversation, but sometimes it kind of goes back to that top down approach. While I feel like in other cultures, it really depends on like money and resources. So even like with the beer brand I'm working with, definitely not content, but we're in sales. It's like they wanted to make a different style of a beer, but the boss in Germany is saying no, coming down to money. So it's just understanding mindset will help really determine how decisions are made. And then later on, if you can build your case, what they need to see to build your case to persuade them to do otherwise. Also start small, scale big. That's really key. Because starting small and scale big, it's lower investment. And it's something that's even recommended to entrepreneurs. And like besides doing your research, because research is very important, but sometimes I found that maybe like in my previous research I've done for even just my small e-commerce brand, I noticed that the people buying my beer was different than people attending my events. So that's where kind of research gets skewed. Like it's great to do research, but then when you see results, like that can also, it kind of goes back to, okay, now you can refine and adjust when you scale up. And then y'all need to read Culture Map because we're all pretty much working in a culture that is outside of our own. Yeah. And I'm going to give Arnaud and Anna's article another shout out because I quote that article many times with colleagues, and Culture Map with colleagues and clients. Because I think when you start to take time to understand how your culture does business, it kind of helps you even better understand other cultures' business. It will help you understand the persuasion as well. And even within your own culture too, because I went back home to the States and I literally was sitting with former college alumni in communications, and they were just all talking about how showing how social media can impact a business. And I said, well, you got to think about like what is your stakeholders, and also how does it play a role in the metrics and what do they care about most? And I think they all had their aha moment because sometimes you just kind of assume in your own culture, oh, this is just the way it goes, and you just kind of do it. And you're kind of like, you kind of even like looking at certain elements, you kind of notice you act the same. And then when you step outside is when you realize, oh, wow, you act the same. And that's where culture plays a role. And so next slide, please. So this is really the time for questions and feedback, and I'm seeing some amazing questions in the chat. So let's start with some questions. So here, Arnaud asks, what metrics or KPIs have been most effective in improving the ROI of content design to stakeholders? So that is a fabulous question. And I think this kind of goes back to perspective and mindset. So the metrics or KPIs, I think when I was at Alibaba, I was on sales. So a lot of the metrics KPIs was sales team. That was very effective and important. Also, even in beer, for example, I'm just giving another example just to give you an idea. Money. Money is very key. So like money talks, shit walks. I feel like a lot of it is money. But you can also ask like your stakeholders too, what's important for them. Sometimes it's marketing. Sometimes it's having just a higher click-through rate in certain areas. Sometimes it's helping them get from point A to point B. And we've received even my client did some really great content. They got some qualitative feedback on how some content should be adjusted. And I just absolutely loved it because this client, it would help them the way the customer explained their feedback, they were able to be like, look, the way this is worded, it can actually be a bit confusing. And so that actually was really great feedback, not just for my client, but for us, but also to see how we're doing. And I hope in the future I can actually gather the feedback that were specifically content and see like how much content feedback we've received over the different versions. I apologize. I am a very busy person, as you can see. So I'm doing my meeting outside in a quiet area. I wanted to be in a quiet zone, but I apologize. I couldn't find it in the area I'm in except here. And so the next question Bridget had, do you have any suggestions on how to navigate situations where you've successfully persuaded stakeholders, but their leaders either don't agree with your solution or don't see it as a priority? That is a fabulous question, Bridget. So my suggestions, I think this is really kind of goes back to what is the leader's mindset and also are they top down, bottom down approach? And this is where you have to really decide, is it worth pursuing or let it go? Or maybe is this something worth pursuing in 6 months and you could just keep gathering the feedback, keep gathering your data. And then like 6 months later, maybe if it's still a critical problem, revisit it. That would be my suggestion. Because even with like in the past, like sales names, like that took like months of persuading. And sometimes things could take months. It could take a year, but finding those small wins, I think, could be key. And building on the small wins could also help with those big wins in the future. So great question, Bridget. Anna has the question. There are many things your business might be looking for and many initiatives going on. How do you decide where to invest your content efforts for maximum impact? You guys are coming up with amazing questions today, friends. That's fabulous. I'm still like deciding myself, like, okay, how do I answer this one? Like I
It's a
go
great
back
time
to
to
my chart.
decide.
Yeah, like my chart. I go back to my chart often, but
Mhm.
sometimes like it kind of goes back to like is it like I also think about my mental health as well. Like I hate to be a little selfish, but I go back to my mental health as well. So I just want to be able to help my stakeholders. And sometimes it's if they're happy, they're happy. And if I feel like something needs to have a bit more persuading, like for example, going back to my client asking saying something was not important. And I'm like, no, this is going to be important in the future. And thinking forward thinking and collecting the feedback. It's small feedback, but it's something to at least show, hey, we should at least consider it for the future. And so I'm still trying myself, even documenting my feedback is going to be a slow process, even for me. But I feel like over time, as you build your cases and you're able to like document it, whether it's in an SOPs or whether it's in glossaries and showcasing like how things have developed over time, I think that can also assist as well. I hope I answered your question, Anna, on that one. And then Jensen is asking, how to work together with stakeholders and other teams to showcase content impact and ROI when KPI involves metrics other than content and design. Let's see. Together with other stakeholders. That is a fabulous question too. Oh my gosh, you guys are like stumping me here, which I love. I feel like this is my opinion. I feel like getting the feedback, the qualitative feedback, and I think this is why I love my clients so much because they're collecting feedback. They're doing like this like initial launch of their product, and and they actually have a customer feedback mechanism within the app. And they also their first set of customers that they're actually asked to provide feedback. And so what I think have been really cool is seeing how like the amount of feedback and getting whether it's critical feedback or whether it's feedback on the content. I think that's been like really effective as well. And just really showing that point A to point B as well too. But honestly, that's a really great question, Arnaud. Everybody's like asking or no, that was Jensen. Fabulous questions. And then so Arnaud is asking, can you write down the name of that training you mentioned on case 2 and that you recommend? I actually have that right here. It is from UX Content Collective. It is, let me see if I could pull the link from, because I just did it. So I paid for it and it should be here. Where is, it's called Mastering Design Systems in Figma by UX Content Collective. So mastering design. Okay, maybe let me take a quick break here as I'm typing this. Okay, did I answer your questions or feedback
We
on the questions I've already answered?
we still
I
have two
apologize.
more questions.
Okay,
One question from Pedro, which is, I have seen so many UX authors talking about workshops and presentation as a way to persuade the stakeholders. What other ways would also be sufficient to bring awareness to the importance of content design?
that is also a really great question. I just think like I'm saying that to every question, but it's true because like even like speaking to like even on the design course last night that I was in, like some of them actually were they actually were like some of them got laid off recently, so they wanted to polish up on their Figma skills. Some of them also they have a lot like one of the girls on the talk last night, she works for a financial institution. And so some of the content actually has to be approved by legal. And so this is where I think showing how showing how like time can be like how content can improve the speed or how even like designers could even be empowered to utilize the pre-approved content in Figma, for example, or seeing how legal you already have like from a legal perspective pre-approved content by legal that they can easily implement into their designs and it will get online faster. I think it's just really kind of going back to like understanding everybody who's involved and then using that to showcase how content design is effective. So it's kind of like it's like show and tell is I guess in my culture it's very show and tell, like show and then tell, or you let them see the results for themselves. But I think it's that aha moment. It's taking that time to find the person who's willing to have that aha moment or to try that way with you. I think is also I think finding those key people who can advocate on your behalf can also be very helpful as well. And then I see Dylan also said, I find it challenging to say no to stakeholders regarding certain tasks. How do you handle this when dealing with your clients? So with my clients right now, like to be honest, I say yes to pretty much everything for my one client. But when I say no, it's literally when I'm challenging when they're telling me no, I'm challenging them back. That's when I have the no's, honestly. So it's not really the task. But sometimes too, my no's are actually, I take that back. My no's are really when it comes to timeline. Like I try to like if I know I need an adjusted timeline, I tell them. And then that's when I'm saying, hey, give me this extra amount of time, or I spend time negotiating, like, okay, what do you really need now and what can wait till tomorrow? And then I also make them like think about that too. But to be honest, when it comes to content right now, I've been saying yes a lot. And I'm just trying to make sure like the content is consistent, and also just making sure that everything that goes up is consistent. So that's really like what I'm focusing on. And so yeah, that's my thing. I know back at Alibaba, I had to say no a lot when it came to my team. I wanted to make sure that all of the writers, the localization writers, they weren't overwhelmed. And so that's where I really pushed the no and showing the proof. I think I said it more in bigger organizations than I do with smaller ones because it's still new. So, but even the small ones, it's more my no's are with negotiation timelines, honestly. Yeah, Bridget said, every question's great. Yes, I agree. Oh my gosh, you guys literally stumped me. Like every question stumped me today.
All right.
I think you did
Thank
great.
you very much.
You did
Yes.
absolutely fantastic.
Yes, I wish I had more like visuals in terms of my case studies. And maybe what I can do later, I can pull my template, like basically remove my content in my glossary and term base and just share the template. Maybe that might help you guys. So this way you could start documenting like your own like SOPs and style guides, and then slowly, if you're in a smaller organization, I think this might be the best way to do it. But with larger organizations, I think you could use it if you don't have your style guides, which I hope you do. Use this as a start to help with your conversation. But this Figma class, so I wrote it, Mastering Design Systems in Figma. It's by UX Content Collective. I'm trying to pull the link for you. Actually,
We can share it in the group later.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
actually, I pulled it.
it's quite
But
famous. UX Content Collective. It's a great source of learning with tons of resources, training. It's definitely check this out. They have also a great newsletter. Sorry.
yes, that I agree on that for sure. So, but they have other great courses. I just had to, like, even for this course, I had to think about money. And so as soon as I got this project, I actually booked this course. So I'm excited to actually show what I learned actually to my client. And I think it's actually going to make a big difference and show some impact and show some very valuable impacts. I'm very excited about this course actually. So if you guys have time, it's $300 US. So I'm not sponsored in any way by UX Content Collective, but this course is fabulous. And there's even like design systems in Figma that are public, and they shared some which were by Wix and Polaris, which is Shopify's, I think. Yeah, Shopify. So you could actually look up design systems in Figma, which I thought was really cool. I didn't know that. And you could actually get some ideas there, but there were some features that Figma just released that I think are going to be game changing for content designers. And actually, teams are still trying to figure out like how to make it work effectively.
Wow. Well, Sabrina, I guess you are leaving us no choice, but to invite you again, just so you can tell us about all the handy tools and tips and tricks that you learned and implemented in your client's organization on how to use Figma for content design and localization.
Well, once I figure that out, we can talk.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.